Welcome to Reframed. Join us as we explore the concept of redemptive business in our unique context on the African continent.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Risk podcast series by Ziwani. My name is Chinwe Okpala. I've been your host for the past few episodes, and I'm excited for another conversation that we're going to be having today. Our guest today is Olatunde Akintola. He's the founder and the CEO of EnergiHub. He's a strategic business leader with more than 22 years of experience across finance, oil and gas, and real estate. He has played across key roles in planning, in execution, and optimization of major upstream and midstream energy projects, including drilling, rig operations, as well as pipeline and flow line construction. He was also instrumental in raising funding for the development of the Dupor Energy Park in one of the south states in Nigeria. And this is a multi-million dollar power plant that processes both oil and gas. Welcome to our podcast today. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you very much, Chinwe. It's my pleasure to be on your show. And thank you once again for the invitation. My career basically started off in finance as an accountant, and I worked in consulting. Then I moved to oil and gas support, and without knowing it, I spent almost 20 years in that industry, working in different subsector of the oil and gas space. Most recently was the one you mentioned, Duport. And after Duport, we decided to set up a firm called EnergiHub to provide upstream support services, asset integrity services to exploration and production company in oil and gas space, and also in the power space as well.
Thank you for that. So I have a question I'd definitely love to ask, especially considering that you have a finance background. What does the word risk mean to you? It's usually the first question I like to ask our guests, and I'm interested in your perspective because of your background.
There is something we call parity of risk and return, which means that the higher the risk, the higher the potential payouts will be if that risk is well engaged. So risk symbolizes that there is a payout at the end of it. If I know I want to do a risky business, my engagement with that risk at 20 may be different from how I'm going to engage with it at 30 or 40. And my engagement with that same risk will be different if all I'm left to play with is my retirement package at 60. So the way we engage with risk has to do with, one, our natural appetite for risk. And then the natural appetite for risk can also be determined by our background. What kind of family you came out from? What kind of friends you have? What kind of things do you see people? What kind of risks do you see people undertake? And also the stage of life that people are in to say, you know what? If I have $1 million at 20, I can choose to stake it in one high risk investment, hoping that I can get this back within. But if I have the same $1 million at 70, it's unlikely that I want to stake it in just one investment that I'm not sure of. So what I'm trying to say is that risk symbol by itself, by that word, symbolizes that there is a possibility that something great could happen and something not so great could also happen, depending on how we engage with that risk.
I knew that I wanted to hear how a finance guy will break down risk. So tell me more about your journey as a chartered accountant.
Yes, I qualified as a chartered accountant quite early. Then there was this thing, everybody keeps telling me, oh, you are a young accountant, And I had this idea that I was very young, so I could do anything. I just kept getting these offers, I was young and I could jump at many things. I went to Resource Consult, where I was working with a very accomplished banker who has who had experience in setting up a bank, a former bank MD. So it gave me a whole lot of room to grow, to express myself. He would just ask me today, you know what, go and look at this thing and let me know what you think. And I'll come back and telling him all that I know about it, and it's giving me room to express. So that gave me a lot of confidence. Then I left Resource Consult to join a company called Global Energy. Global Energy provides support services to exploration companies, and they were also trying to be an exploration and production company by themselves after the period I got in there. So it was a very critical time for me to be in a place where they have been a service company, and now they are actually trying to become an operator about the same period. And interestingly, again, I was also lucky to be and blessed to have worked with very supportive bosses. And I was also spotted by the group CEO not too long after I joined, and he started giving me some things directly for me to do for him and all that. So that gave me some level of visibility again within the company. And I think I did less than 2 years there, where I got another opportunity to work with a drilling company. Now, this it doesn't get closer to oil and gas than it is when you are working in drilling company, because that is the heart of the oil itself. So I joined the drilling company, and I was given a very important task of being an account manager for a rig. And this goes beyond just being an accountant. As an account manager, I basically I work closely with the rig manager and oversees everything that goes into the rig. That's it, from the contracting to the administration, to the spares, to the replenishment of spares, to engagement with clients. And these are IOCs, international oil companies. So it is interesting that I had that exposure, and I was still in my 20s. I would sit down with people in their 50s and 60s discussing, sometimes arguing about what principle holds here. No, this is not what is in the contract and all that. And all this, had given me a lot of exposure, confidence, and also insight into the industry. And at this point, the company was going through some troubled time. And that is where you talk about risk. The company was going through a turbulent time. It was the best time for anybody to jump out. But guess what? That was the time I had another visibility within that same setup, because everybody wanted to talk to me. The MD of the company wanted me to do stuff. The chairman wanted me to do stuff. Anytime they are trying to have anything with the board, somebody wants me to be around. And this was the time that people were leaving. And this gave me a whole lot of opportunity to understand the business. Then I went to another company called EnergiHub. EnergiHub was also offered a different perspective, because it's an exploration and production company, a marginal field operator who was in joint venture relationship with Oando. Oando is arguably one of the biggest Nigerian oil company today. So Oando was a joint venture partner. And then, so when I went in there, it was a different kettle of fish. But the experience I'd gathered in drilling, I was able to bring it to bear in this space. We just finished their third production well. And the average cost of each of those wells was about $30 million from budgets of about $20 million. But when I came into this space, I am a drilling person. I understand drilling, like that's what I've done for the last 5 years before I joined. So I came in there and I worked with people that were there to say, you know what is going on here? And I had a gentleman that I said, oh, he sat down with me. He was one of the people that will report to me. Sat down and he said, sir, these are the things I've observed. I said, no worry. We went through the process for the company, for the process for cost recognition. And we looked at it critically and we said, okay, a few things need to change for us to go into this new development, the next well that we're going to drill. And I approached the MD with it. We had the same process, but I just tweaked just two elements of that process to say, you know what, no invoice will be processed if it is not first, if the timesheet is not signed at the rig site. And the person that will sign it is the person that I've appointed, no other person. And when we also had meetings with all the service providers, I also changed a little thing to say, you know what, nobody should deploy any equipment to the drilling site without having a purchase order for it. It looked like something very simple, but guess what that resulted in? The last well was drilled under budget at $18.7 million.
Wow.
The first three were average of $30 million.
Each?
Average, yes. Well, one was 28, one was 31, one was 30, one was 32. So average of the three will be $30 million.
That's a significant percentage in cost savings.
Absolutely.
That's interesting. And this was just through things that looked like mundane operational changes.
In fact, one of the interesting things was that I joined this company in October of 2013. They were still trying to figure out what the cost of one of the wells that was finished in 2012. They were still trying to figure out the cost. But when I planned and designed the way the last well was going to be drilled, the one I'm talking about, I knew the cost of that well every night before I go to bed.
That's operational rigor.
Yes. Every night before I go to sleep, I know the cost of that well. Because what it simply means is that what I think is a lot of people do not like to go through the rigor of that that requires them to get a certain outcome. We all have the outcome that we have in our mind, but we will know if the process we have on ground is able to produce the outcome that we desire.
Considering the fact that there were already 3 wells that had been built before this fourth one, and you made significant systemic changes that translated to clear outcomes on cost savings, was there any form of resistance on your end, and how did you navigate that? Because I believe that you could not have delivered in isolation. There must have been key stakeholders that you needed in terms of making these changes and shifts. And there's also the possibility that there must have been some resistance. So, what were the barriers, especially considering that it was not something new?
Okay, I like what you said. What were the barriers? Because yes, the way I said it, it sounded very easy, but it wasn't. I think the real problem most of us have is that even when we know what the right thing is, we are not willing to stand alone. And I think that is one thing that is not part of my own playbook. Except I'm not convinced of something. Once I'm convinced about it, I will take it around everyone that needs to understand it. For instance, before this started, there was something I did. Like I did mention that some wells were at finished, but we couldn't tell what the cost is. I would consider myself as an entrepreneur at this point. Whatever I am not convinced of, I will look for answers for it. And if the answers are not valid enough, I will keep pushing until I push it to the highest level. So there are a couple of companies that submitted invoices, and the invoices, I couldn't really place them where they should be. So what I did was I designed a template called invoice rejection notice, and I packed all the invoices and I told them the reasons why. Then when I discussed it with my superior then, he said to me, do you know the people that own the company that you want to return their invoice? I said, yes, I know. He said, I cannot sign this. I said, no. I said, there is something, I told him, I said, there is something called plausible deniability. I said, it's not for you to sign. I will sign it. So when they come back to say, what happened? Just say, you don't know about me. He said, okay, I'm willing to do that, but this must not come back to me in any way. And I told him I'm fine. And I signed all those invoices, all those rejection notices. And the truth is that everywhere erupted. My MD was getting calls and was calling me today. What is it that I'm hearing? What is going on? I said, sir, when you come back, when you are in the office, I'll come. So when he came, I explained to him, and he was like, wow. Say, these are director companies. So I don't know what you're talking about. Just be sure that whatever you are saying, you are certain that you are right. Interestingly, what I only ask them to come and do is to come and defend their invoices. I kid you not. I don't remember the figures clearly again, but not less than $4-5 million were shaved off in that instance. Oil and gas is top dollar business. So, huge money was shaved off. And my name was everywhere. So people will come in with their business development guys, with their engineer, with their this, and sit down with us and okay, we agree that this one is not, but this one it is. And eventually, it was good. I had a good time. It was a risk I was willing to take.
I'm curious to know, I just have one more question before we move to talking about how you transitioned from entrepreneurship, like you called it, or career to business. What role did your faith play in terms of where did you get the courage to face that giant at the time?
Honestly, I didn't, as at that time, I didn't think I was doing something courageous. I didn't see it as something that I needed courage to do. I was just acting in my natural state. So what I tell people is that whatever you want me to sign, I have to satisfy my conscience that it is good. Now, when you talk about my faith plays, I like to say it's a way of life. Plays, I'm a Christian, and I'm not ashamed to say that. I'm not ashamed to declare it. Christ is the reason why I'm being able to do all the things God has helped me to do so far. So I don't, honestly, at the time this was happening, it was later. Now that I say it in retrospect, I realized that everybody that didn't want to be part of that were really afraid, and I didn't even think I was doing something that needed courage. I was just doing what was right, what I knew was right.
Now let's talk about business. I remember when we were planning this conversation, you mentioned that by 2011, I hope I have the date right, you felt that it was time to move out of accounting and more into core business itself. Can you tell us more about that shift? How did you make that transition?
At that point, I realized that I needed to be in the front of the business as against at the back end. And that became more even apparent as you sit down with your bosses to say, okay, this is what we plan to do and all that. And what they go and do eventually is different. And then we have to now go back and recalibrate and recalibrate. And I'm like, you know what? There has to be a better way to do it, to doing this. So I decided to say, you know what? And I'm this person that believes that I just don't jump into things. I get prepared for it before I go do it. And I felt that maybe business could give me some level of preparedness for this. So I decided to say, you know what, let's go to business school. When we come back, we'll see how we navigate ourselves to the front of the business as against being on the back end of it. Another interesting thing happened because I was working in a particular business. I have all the data of the company in my hand. So while I was in the UK trying to, they will always want you to use Tesco and all the company that is around them to do all the analysis. No, I keep going back to use the company where I work because really I have their data and I can relate with it. And I did a whole lot of analysis based on that. Then I remember once I'd done a competitive strategy analysis, and I submitted the project to my supervisor, to my lecturer, who called me to say, you know what, are you working in this company? I said, yes. He said, wow, this is the precarious situation right here. And the professor was actually very interested in how the company was going to solve that problem, or what proposal I had to solve that problem. Then one day I was talking to my MD and he was saying, okay, this is what we're going to do. And I said, oh, sir, just hold on. And I opened my laptop, popped out a document and shared with him. And he was like, where did you get this from? And he was willing to implement something that I was basically using to pass my exams in the company. And that was for me very, very fascinating. Because as at that time, one of the things that we were trying to market ourselves based on is that we are a Nigerian premier drilling company. And I told him that, sir, to be honest with you, it is nice for the country to say, oh, yes, we are the first drilling company in Nigeria, jack of drilling, offshore drilling company. But that doesn't really count for the person that wants to give you a job. The person that you want to drill for doesn't care whether you are the first or the only Nigerian company. What they care about, we need to look for aspects of our business that will resonate with them. And that should not just be because we're a Nigerian company. Let's go to our safety record. Let's go. So I started looking for other things that could be selling points aside from the fact that I'm Nigerian.
Thank you, Tunde. This has been very insightful. I'm just curious, from everything you have said, you basically shifted from a stable, high income earning and permanent position to being the founder and CEO of your own company. Tell us more about this and how did you land your first project or proposal? How did the process of setting up your own organization, how did that come about? What did you learn? Were there any challenges? Did you have to consider partnerships or joint collaborations, or did you do it all by yourself?
Sometime in 2015, I think that's where it started from. In 2015, um, one of the companies where we have worked had appointed the receiver manager to liquidate the company or run the operation, whichever one they deem fit. And the receiver manager reached out to us to say, what can we help do? So we sent them a proposal on in 2015. I remember it was December 1st. We sent them a proposal to say these are the things that we can do. And we never heard from them again until sometimes 6 months after in the new year, the proposal that we sent to them was published as invitation to tender. And what we did was to say, okay, let's also apply, which we applied. But a whole lot of things happened. But eventually, we were shortlisted, but eventually not considered. But we felt that we had submitted a very solid document. But what we gathered later on was that, some people felt that we were fronting for some of our former bosses, and that was a bit painful because at that point it wasn't the quality of our submission that was being put to question. We needed to create a track record which will not make anybody put me in that situation again. So, and then I was running this with a friend and former colleague, and we decided to say, you know what, let's form a company. We registered a company in 2018, but that's in 2018, I got an appointment to become CFO of DuPont. So I just left it there. But in 2020, I decided to say, you know what, from next year, 2021, we're going to actually start this company, EnergiHub, and just put it out there. Let's build the track record that we have always wanted to build. And that was how EnergiHub started in 2021. Yes, I had to walk away from a stable life, stable income, and stable everything. But again, I've always known that there is a call of entrepreneurship upon me. So it's something I had to do at some point. I started this with a partner who at some point had to relocate, and he actually believed that his relocation wouldn't affect the running of the business. But eventually we realized that He wasn't going to be able to function at both ends. He was going to be in Canada and also have 100% attention to Nigeria. So sometime few years after, we had to decide to separate so that he can face what's in there to face in Canada. And after which, we had to. So what's now the difference thing now is that I understood that selecting a partner has to go beyond friendship. And what is easy, you have to actually sit down and draft what are the things you need in a partner. If you want a partner, does the partner bring in complementary skill sets, or is just bring the same kind of skill that you have? So there are a lot of consideration that is required when you are bringing in a partner. That level I didn't have before. That level of understanding I didn't have. But after that, I am now a lot more circumspect as to who is the right partner. You can be great friends. You can be an investor. Investor is different from a partner. So, and all those understanding, I gathered it along the way. And now we are better structured. Now, talking about our first business, our first check came in February 2022. After we started operation in January 2021, so that was 14 months after, and we had staff, we were paying salaries, we were paying rent, we were paying everything. It was an interesting time.
Can you expand a bit more on that? Especially considering the fact that you're coming from stability. So this was not necessarily familiar territory for you. So how did you navigate that?
Though it wasn't a familiar territory, but I am well aware that business is it's not rosy. It's not built for everyone. It's not for everyone, actually. So, as a matter of fact, I planned for 2 years without revenue. That was the setup. That was the outlook I had. Why am I going to think I'm special? Oh, I know the industry. That doesn't hand anybody any check. It doesn't. In fact, if it does anything, the kind of lifestyle I've lived has made it even difficult because all the people that have tried to straighten their business, they say, you, this one, you will not get anything. So it was a tough time. But as at that time, I do not tell anybody that I do not have revenue. I kept it all within myself and my partner. Our staff salaries were paid on time. The reason is because I don't want any staff to start coming to work thinking that since we are not sure when the salary is coming, I can behave anyhow. I can skip work on some days and say I don't have transport since I've not been paid. So I didn't want any of those attitudinal issues. And I didn't want anybody to pity me. So I wasn't telling anybody that we have not made a check. You will see me everywhere. I'm showing up. I'm knocking on doors. I'm having meetings. I'm asking questions. I'm pitching. And no sign that there is no revenue. Zero sign. In fact, that particular check came in the day we were having our year retreat. I think so. We were having the retreat for 2022 when that check came, and I just announced right there. And the facilitators that I brought were looking at me like this, like your first check. but I was excited. I just had to tell them that, guys, for the first time we have a revenue. And the facilitators were looking at me like, really? You are having first check? But that is exactly what happened. So I feel strongly that there has to be something more important driving us. Money makes life easy. Money makes things a lot better. But there has to be more driving force beyond money.
I'd like to understand how the posture you had taken earlier when you were still working as an employee, if it impacted any way when you decided to transition to entrepreneurship. Remember the example you shared, how you had to cut costs significantly for a project. Was there any blowback or benefits from those choices or the reputation that you had built in the industry?
It had more blowback really than being helpful. However, the only area I'll say is that when people want things done, they know who to call. When people want things done and done right, they know who to call.
I agree with you on that. That's good context. Let's talk about the risk of doing business in West Africa. If a young entrepreneur walked up to you and asked you to advise them on how to navigate, what would you tell them?
There's country risk, there is business risk, there is financial risk. There are different kind of risk. Now, doing business in West Africa, I haven't done business in America or in South Africa. I haven't done business elsewhere. I've done business in Nigeria. So a business what a business is looking to catch on is the opportunity that exists within a defined environment. If I am trying to solve a problem that is the same as in Asia, Africa, and America, that means that my business can as well be global. So in that way, if I'm able to do the business in all those places where the business can thrive because my product or my service is needed across the globe, that means that I'm able to dilute and or diversify my risk from different countries. However, if the opportunity I have only exists in West Africa, I need to build in the processes and protection that West Africa that will fit West Africa such that my business can thrive. Business is mostly process and location specific. So if I am trying to catch on opportunities in West Africa, there might be foreign exchange fluctuation, which is one of the things that we've had to deal with in Nigeria. There might be policy fluctuation because today the government policy has gone this direction and everybody's trying to go. And then 2 years down the line, some people are already trying to build a factory and then the policy reverses and you're asking yourself, what am I going to use the factory to do? So there are different policy and risk elements to doing business in Africa. People have always said that, oh, doing business in Nigeria is not for the faint-hearted, and I agree absolutely. But I also hear people that are doing business from different part of the world saying business is not for the faint-hearted. So it just looks like people localize their experience and think that it has to do with their own environment alone. Some people see chaos, other people see problems, some other people are seeing a massive opportunity to solve the problem.
Summarizing from what I heard you say, business is location and process specific. And then also extracting from the stories you had shared earlier, especially the 14-month waiting period before you got your first check, there needs to be adequate planning. That was even how your business could run. You planned for 2 years, even though you needed it for just 14 months. But it seems like it's important to put proper planning in place, be patient, and then also be resilient. And what role would you say that your faith has played in your journey in all of this, the risks you have taken, the outcomes and the milestones that you have achieved?
My faith, is a critical part of the journey. In fact, it's an important part of it. Starting out, is basically committing my ways into the hand of the Lord and, praying about every opportunity, trying to listen to God to know, this is something that is worth pursuing. This one, you don't need to, put so much energy on it. And people always say that hope is not a strategy, but I can tell you that prayer, for me, is a strategy. And, for how much we have done and for so much that we are hoping to do in the years ahead, is basically by God's grace. We sit back to envision, we sit back to strategize, and we commit our ways into the hand of the Lord.
Thank you, Olatunde. This has been a great conversation. As we were talking, I just remember the scripture in the book of Psalms where David says, I have set the Lord always before me. Because he's at my right hand, I will not be shaken. So for me, that scripture emphasizes the importance of always involving God at the helm of the decision-making affairs of your life and trusting him for the best outcomes. So this has been a very exciting conversation. Thank you for your time. And thank you also to our audience and to our listeners. We hope that you have learned a lot and that you were blessed listening to this podcast. Thank you once again, and until the next one. Bye.
Thank you very much, Chinwe, for having me. Thank you so much for the audience. Bye.
Thank you for joining us. This episode of Reframed was brought to you by Ziwani, a community of business leaders who partner together to live out their kingdom calling in the marketplace within Africa. To know more about us, visit our website at ziwani.com. That's ZIWANI.com.